Week 17 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few quarterbacks I look to drop this week. The first guy, Derek Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders. So Derek Carr, he's a tough quarterback to trust. I know he's had a couple pop games. I know he's got good weapons in Devontae Adams, Darren Waller came back, and Josh Jacobs. But this Raider offense is so inconsistent that it's hard to trust them, and for the majority of the season, it's been like that. So the last few games here for Carr, Week 14 at the Rams, 137 pass yards, 2 went those 11 rush yards. Week 15 versus the Patriots, 231 passing, 3 touchdowns and interception. And then Week 16 at Pittsburgh, 174 pass yards, a touchdown, 14 rushing. So I know on the road it's been tough for him. It's a home game here in Week 17, but a very tough matchup versus San Francisco 49ers. I give up the second least amount of fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So Carr, like I said, with bad 2 out of 3 last ball games, after he was on a pretty good streak here, and with a tough match versus San Francisco, there's no way fantasy owners are going to use him here in the championship week or semifinals, depending if you play a Week 18. But anyway, he's a quarterback to drop this week. The next guy is Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos. It's still surprisingly owned in 48% of fantasy leagues here is Russ, and it's just been a bust of a season for him, no doubt about it. And this Seahawks team, they gypped him in that deal, it looks like, pretty much. That Geno Smith's been a better quarterback this season. They got a couple draft picks. They got Noah Fant as well. And Russell Wilson just hasn't really done anything this year except 1 or 2 monster ball games. For him, Week 13 at Baltimore, 189 pass yards, 21 rushing. Week 14, surprisingly, versus the Chiefs, 247 passing, 3 touchdowns, and though 57 rushing. Week 15, missed the game with a concussion. And then Week 16 of the banged-up Ram defense, 214 passing, a touchdown, 3 interceptions, 17 rushing. So Week 17, I know again he versus the Kansas City Chiefs, but this time in Arrowhead. And the last time he got his bell rung, it was Russell Wilson as well versus Chief team. So this week here, I don't think you could trust him at all. And it's just been a bust of a season for Russell Wilson. And he's a quarterback I would drop this week. In the third and final quarterback I look to drop this week's Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers, for the most part, he hasn't been fantasy value at all this season, especially the last month of the season. His teams are winning the last 3 out of 4 games, but he's not putting up numbers. Week 12 at Philly, 140 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 win those. Week 13 in Chicago, 182 pass yards, a touchdown, 2-point conversion. Week 15 versus the Rams, 229 passing, a touchdown, and interception. And Week 16 in Miami, 238 passing, a touchdown, and an into. So at least early in the year, he was getting about 20 fantasy points a game. But over the last few weeks, he's averaging only 15 fantasy points a game as Rodgers. I know Week 17 is a decent matchup versus the Vikings. They give up the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. But right now, Aaron Rodgers, he's owned way too many fantasy leagues this season. And he's just a guy that I think his better fantasy days are behind him. So that's a few quarterbacks I look to drop here in Week 17 of the fantasy football season.